You know that feeling when you're the only sober person at a party you paid for, but weren't invited to? That was me at my brother Evan's DJ launch party. The music was loud enough to rattle the windows of the old family mansion, windows that still leaked every time it rained. I'd spent 12 hours catering the event, arranging trays of smoked salmon I couldn't afford, and photographing my brother's friends, who treated me like invisible staff. I walked up to my mother, Angela, in the kitchen. She was laughing, holding court in a dress that cost more than my car. I asked her quietly about the reimbursement for the catering bill, $600 I needed for rent. She didn't even look at me. She just waved a manicured hand and said, "Not now. Morgan, don't be tacky. You're acting like hired help." Seconds later, I watched Evan climb onto a table in the main hall. He was holding a bottle of vintage champagne, $500 a bottle. He popped the cork, spraying foam over the crowd, laughing like a king. That champagne was bought with the money meant to fix the roof above his head. Something inside me didn't snap. It clarified. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked to the AV booth at the back of the room. The DJ, one of Evan's friends. He was too busy watching the spectacle to notice me. I cut the music. The silence hit the room like a physical blow. Then, I pulled the HDMI cable from his laptop and plugged it into mine. Before I tell you what flashed on that screen, and the silence that followed, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels. The projector beam cut through the dim room like a searchlight. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as the image hit the 20-foot screen behind the DJ booth. I hadn't prepared a slideshow of Evan's childhood photos or a sentimental montage of family memories. I had prepared a spreadsheet. On the left side of the screen, in high-definition starkness, was the bank statement for the estate maintenance trust. It showed a starting balance of $145,000. Below it was a list of withdrawals that drained the account to zero in less than 18 months. On the right side of the screen, I projected the corresponding receipts I'd pulled from my mother's cloud account. "If you're enjoying the smoked salmon," I said into the microphone, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling, "you should thank the structural integrity of the East Wing." I clicked the remote. The screen zoomed in. Withdrawal, $12,000. Receipt, Dr. Vandelay. Body sculpting clinic. A murmur of confusion turned into sharp whispers. My mother, Angela, froze halfway to the stage, her face draining of color. I clicked again. Withdrawal, $4,000. Receipt, Sweetwater Sound. DJ interface and lighting rig. That equipment Evan is using right now. I pointed to the booth. That wasn't a sponsorship. That was the money meant to fix the flashing on the chimney. My father, Jesse, finally snapped out of his shock. He started shoving his way through the crowd toward me, his face a mask of fury. "Cut the feed!" he shouted at the sound guy. "Cut it now." But I didn't stop. I needed them to understand the architecture of this betrayal. See, when my grandmother, Grandpa George's wife, passed away, she left this mansion to me. I was the remainderman, the future owner. But because she loved her son, she granted my parents a life estate. It was a simple, generous legal arrangement. They could live in this house for free until they died. On one condition. They had to use the trust fund she left behind to maintain the property and pay the taxes. They were the caretakers. I was the future. It was a golden ticket. A free mansion. A fully funded repair account. All they had to do was not steal. I clicked the remote one last time. A photo of the water-damaged ceiling in the guest room appeared next to a receipt for a lease down payment on a luxury sedan. "You broke the condition," I said, looking directly at my father as he reached the stage. "You didn't just steal my money. You stole the roof over your own heads to buy applause from strangers." Angela reached the laptop and yanked the HDMI cable out. The screen went black, but it didn't matter. The image was already burned into 100 retinas. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. Evan stood behind his new DJ deck, looking small and ridiculous in his designer jacket. The guests, investors, friends, Neighbors weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at my parents with the kind of polite horror reserved for car accidents. "Get out!" my father hissed, gripping my arm hard enough to bruise. "Get out of my house." I pulled my arm free. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just adjusted my purse strap. "I'm leaving," I said. "But don't get too comfortable. Dad, it's going to rain on Tuesday." I walked out through the stunned crowd. Behind me, I heard the murmurs rising into a roar. The party was over. The eviction had just begun. I expected silence. I expected shame. I forgot who I was dealing with. By 8 in the morning the next day, my phone was vibrating off the nightstand. It wasn't an apology. It was a bombardment. From Mom, "You are a jealous, vindictive little witch." From Mom, "You ruined your brother's career launch because you can't stand seeing him shine." From Mom, "That money was ours to manage. We are your parents. You owe us everything." They didn't see the theft. They only saw the audacity of the mirror I'd held up. I didn't reply. I just watched the weather forecast. On Tuesday, the storm hit. It was a standard coastal squall. But 50-mile-per-hour winds are unkind to rotted wood. Around noon, I got the call. It was my father. "Jesse." He didn't say hello. The roof over the east wing just collapsed. He shouted over the sound of rain. "Water is pouring into the hallway. The structural beams are compromised." "I know," I said, sipping my coffee. "That's what happens when you spend the maintenance fund on liposuction." "Listen to me, Morgan," he snapped, his voice dropping into that authoritative baritone that used to make me flinch. "You are the legal owner of this house. That makes this your asset. You need to take out a personal loan or authorize emergency funds immediately. If the water damage spreads, it devalues your inheritance. You need to protect your investment." The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive. He was trying to leverage my ownership, the very thing he'd stolen from, to force me to pay for his negligence. And suddenly, I was 19 again. I was standing in that same kitchen, my jaw swollen to the size of a grapefruit. I had an impacted wisdom tooth that had gone septic. The pain was blinding. I needed $500 for emergency oral surgery. I asked my mother, tears streaming down my face. She didn't look up from her iPad. She was browsing vacation rentals in Cabo. "Stop being so dramatic, Morgan," she had said. "We don't have $500 for every little ache. Rinse it with salt water. You'll be fine." I rinsed with salt water for 3 weeks. I developed a fever. I eventually sold my laptop to pay for the extraction myself. 2 days after she told me we had no money, I watched Evan unbox a $2,000 Pioneer DJ deck in the living room. "Invest in his talent," she had told me. That memory used to make me cry. Now, it just made me cold. I realized then what I was dealing with. It wasn't just greed. It was the delusion of the tenant. My parents didn't see themselves as trustees with a fiduciary duty. They believed that because they gave birth to me, my property was their property. They viewed me not as a daughter, but as a resource to be harvested. In their minds, the trust fund wasn't a legal obligation. It was back pay for raising me. They felt entitled to consume my future, to decorate their present. They truly believed that their status as parents superseded the laws of the state. "Morgan," my father yelled into the phone. "Did you hear me? The water is ruining the hardwood. You have to pay for this." I leaned back in my chair, looking at the rain hitting my own window, a window I paid for. "I hear you, Dad," I said, and I remember what Mom told me when I was in pain. "What are you talking about?" "The roof," I said. "Just rinse it with salt water. It'll be fine." I hung up. Then I blocked his number. I wasn't the bank anymore. I was the landlord, and I was done with the tenants. I didn't go to a therapist. I went to a diner on 4th Street to meet Sabrina. Sabrina wasn't just my best friend. She was a real estate attorney who billed $400 an hour and had a shark tattooed on her ankle. She ordered black coffee and spread the deed to the mansion across the sticky table. We didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about how much it hurt. We talked about statutes. They treated the trust like a piggy bank, Sabrina said, tapping a red pen against the paper. But here's the thing about pigs, Morgan. Eventually, they get slaughtered. She didn't waste time reading the entire 50-page document. She flipped to page 12 and circled a single paragraph in aggressive red ink. The doctrine of waste. People think a life estate is ownership, she said, her voice low and sharp. It's not. It's a long-term rental with zero rent. But the law is very specific. The life tenant has a fiduciary duty to the remainderman, that's you, to maintain the asset. If they damage the property's value through negligence or malice, they don't just get fined. They forfeit the estate. I looked at the water-damaged photos of the hallway I'd taken earlier. The roof collapse, I said. Is that enough? Sabrina called the stolen maintenance fund the smoking gun. They took money meant to prevent damage, caused the damage, and breached the deed through voluntary waste. We drafted a cold, factual notice to cure 30 days to restore the trust fund and fix the roof. Or eviction would follow. They won't have the money, I said. That's the point, Sabrina replied. Let them dig. Angela laughed it off in a voicemail, mocking the idea that family could be evicted. She believed motherhood outranked property law. She tore up the notice. The deadline was a bluff. Sabrina wasn't waiting for repairs. She was waiting for the county clerk. 3 weeks later, she revealed the real leverage: unpaid property taxes. 3 years of default. A lien already filed. Tax foreclosure in 21 days. Under the life estate, failure to pay taxes wasn't negligence. It was affirmative waste. It triggered immediate forfeiture. No drawn-out court fight. No debate. Eviction was instantaneous. The judge had already signed the writ of possession. The sheriff served it that night. Angela collapsed. Jessie blustered, then crumbled. The law didn't care about titles, roles, or guilt trips. They had 24 hours to leave. When Angela begged, calling it family, I felt nothing. You weren't family, I said. You were tenants. Bad ones. The locks were changed. The house was secured. I paid the back taxes and thought it was over. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, Angela tried to destroy my career with false accusations. I responded with evidence. A defamation suit. And a permanent restraining order, building a legal wall she could never breach. 6 months later, the house was quiet. I repainted the blackened room blue. Not to erase the past, but to reclaim the future. They wanted status. I wanted peace. And I got it.